The moment I stepped into my life's biggest risk, I didn't expect it to end like this. 19 years of marriage, gone in a heartbeat. And the worst part? I didn't just betray my husband behind closed doors. I did it right in front of him. I stood there, asking another man, my affair partner, the question I should have only ever asked my husband. You might wonder, why? Why would someone unravel everything they built over almost 2 decades? Well, I didn't think it would end like this either. For years, our life looked perfect on the outside. My husband and I were the ideal couple, or so people said. We were the couple that everyone thought was unbreakable, the kind of love story others envied. But behind that facade was a woman, me, craving something more, something I couldn't even define. I used to blame him, thinking he lacked something, that maybe he'd lost that spark, that thrill. But now, I see it differently. It wasn't him. It was me. I was the one who couldn't stay satisfied with the perfect, steady life we'd created together. I was looking for something beyond stability, something wild and new. The affair started like a whisper I couldn't ignore, the kind of whisper that lingers in the back of your mind, almost taunting you, tempting you to explore what could be. I didn't plan it. I didn't go looking for it. It just happened, slipping into my life like an unexpected storm. One minute, I was a devoted wife, loyal and trustworthy, and the next, I was staring into the eyes of a man who was giving me something my husband hadn't in years. It wasn't just lust. It was deeper than that. It was feeling seen, appreciated, desired in ways I hadn't felt since the early days of my marriage. With him, I felt alive in ways that my day-to-day life had long since dulled. At first, it was thrilling. It was like waking up from a long, cold sleep. I felt wanted, and even more than that, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. But then, there was a shift. The affair stopped being thrilling. It became real. Suddenly, I wasn't just sneaking around for a rush or an escape. I was living 2 lives, each as real as the other. And with every stolen glance, every secret touch, my feelings grew. Until, one night, my affair partner asked me a question that sent shivers down my spine. He looked at me, his eyes burning with an intensity that felt almost dangerous, and he asked, "Do you love me?" I froze. I wanted to say no. I wanted to brush it off as just a fling, something I could leave behind. But I knew the truth. I was drawn to him like a magnet, pulled by something dark and raw, something I couldn't push away. And then, before I could even process it, I heard myself whisper back, "Yes." That one word changed everything, because now it wasn't just a secret. Now it was a decision I was going to have to make. From that moment, I started slipping further and further from my husband, like sand slipping through his fingers. And he noticed. He wasn't blind to the changes, the late nights, the hollow smiles. The man who had once trusted me with his whole heart started looking at me differently. Suspicion crept into his eyes. I could feel him watching me, his gaze heavy with unasked questions. And still, I couldn't stop myself from diving deeper with my affair partner. It was like trying to stop a storm with your bare hands. Impossible, yet exhilarating. Every time I was with him, I felt a surge of life, a thrill that I couldn't replicate anywhere else. But each time I went home to my husband, I felt that thrill turn into guilt, a weight pressing down on my heart. I'd lie awake at night, wondering how I'd become this person, someone who could look her husband in the eye with a smile, all the while hiding another life. I wanted to end it, to stop this madness. But I was addicted, pulled by a force that felt beyond my control. I couldn't bear to let go of what we had. This dangerous, electrifying bond that made me feel alive in ways my marriage hadn't in years. And then came the night that would ruin everything. That night, I asked my husband to sit down. My heart was racing, my hands trembling. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 1,000 times, but as he sat down, looking at me with those trusting eyes, my words crumbled. All I could say was, "There's someone else." The look on his face. I will never forget it. It was as if I had shattered his entire world with those 3 words. But the worst part was, I didn't even regret it. Because standing there, facing the man I'd been married to for almost 2 decades, all I could think about was the other man, the man who was waiting for me. And as my husband sat there, heartbroken, I did the unthinkable. I looked him in the eye and asked, "Should I go to him?" The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I watched him, searching for a response, any response. But he just sat there, his face blank, his eyes wide with disbelief. I could feel the weight of what I'd done crashing down on me. A tidal wave of regret and shame, and yet there was a small part of me that felt relieved. I had finally let the truth out, finally stopped living the lie. But the relief was short-lived. My husband didn't answer my question. He didn't beg me to stay or tell me to leave. Instead, he looked down. His shoulders slumped, as if the life had been drained out of him. And in that moment, I realized the full extent of what I had done. I had broken him in a way I hadn't anticipated, in a way I couldn't undo. In the days that followed, our home became a place of silence. He barely spoke to me, barely looked at me. The once warm atmosphere between us had turned cold, like a winter that would never end. I tried to talk to him, tried to explain myself, but every time I opened my mouth, the words felt hollow, meaningless. How could I possibly explain what I had done? How could I justify the betrayal, the lies? And yet, even in the midst of that silence, I couldn't stop thinking about my affair partner. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was cruel. But I couldn't get him out of my mind. I was still drawn to him, still intoxicated by the forbidden allure of what we had. I found myself counting down the hours until I could see him again, desperate to escape the suffocating guilt that filled every corner of my home. But my affair partner? He wasn't the same. The moment I had confessed to my husband, everything had changed between us. He became distant, cautious, as if he was afraid of the reality I had brought crashing down on us. The thrill was gone, replaced by something darker, something that felt dangerously close to regret. One evening, I met him in the quiet corner of a cafe, our usual rendezvous. But this time he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. And then he said, "This isn't what I wanted." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had sacrificed everything for this man, had torn my life apart for the sake of our connection. And now, as I sat there, looking into his eyes, I realized that he was slipping away from me, just as I had slipped away from my husband. The irony was almost laughable. I had destroyed my marriage, and now I was losing the man I had risked everything for. I tried to hold on to him, tried to convince him that we could still have something real, something lasting. But he just shook his head, his gaze distant, as if he was already somewhere else. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of my choices crashing down on me. The realization that I had lost everything. My husband, my lover, my sense of self. I returned home that night, empty and hollow. My husband was waiting for me, sitting in the dark, his face etched with a sorrow I had never seen before. And as I looked at him, I felt a surge of regret so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. I had betrayed him, had torn apart the life we had built together, all for the sake of a fantasy that had crumbled to dust. We didn't speak. There were no words left between us, no way to bridge the chasm I had created. All we had was the silence, the unbearable weight of what I had done. And as I sat there beside the man I had once loved more than anything, I realized that I would carry this regret for the rest of my life. The thrill, the excitement, the passion, it had all faded away, leaving nothing but a hollow ache where my heart had once been. In the end, I lost both men, and with them I lost myself. And now, as I sit here, alone with my thoughts, I am haunted by the choices I made, the lives I destroyed. I thought I was searching for something more, something that would make me feel alive, but all I found was emptiness, a void that no one else could fill. And now, I am left with nothing but the memory of a love I destroyed, and a life I can never reclaim.